I'm going to introduce you now, okay? Luisa Lang Owen is our featured speaker for this month's Community Colloquy, which is a monthly event that we have here at the Senior Center. Luisa is an artist and professor emerita of art education at Wright State University. And 20 years ago, she published her memoir, a book called Casualty of War. The subtitle is A Childhood Remembered. So the book is from the perspective of a child going through what she describes in the book. It's a story of her childhood in a Yugoslavian concentration camp, which was for ethnic Germans after the Second World War. And it's a terrible story of terror and death, but also of courage and perseverance. Just to give you a little background history of the whole situation, our history books say that World War II ended in 1945. Our history books say nothing about what happened in Eastern Europe after the war ended. And that's what this story is about. Luisa belongs to a group of ethnic Germans called the Donauschwaben, the Danube Swabians, who lived in Yugoslavia for more than 300 years. They had been invited to Yugoslavia by the Austrian-Hungarian emperor to serve as skilled workers and farmers in that area. So after the war, this group of people, specifically the Yugoslavian Donauschwaben, suffered a terrible horror after the end of the war. The war did not end with that, in 1945 for them. It went on for years afterwards. They suffered collective punishment. They suffered ethnic cleansing in revenge for Nazi atrocities and persecutions of the Yugoslavians. Although this group of Germans, these ethnic Germans in Yugoslavia, had no connection with the Nazis and were actually viewed by Germans and by the Nazis as second-class Germans. They weren't even recognized as real Germans. And yet they paid the price of all Germans after the war. Excuse me. The war, the aftermath of World War II for ethnic Germans all over Eastern Europe was terrible. 16 million of them were driven out of their homelands in Eastern European countries to go to who knows where. Many of them returned to Germany, but Germany was in shambles. It was completely destroyed after the Second World War. So it was quite a serious problem. The citizens of Yugoslavia, though, the ethnic Germans in Yugoslavia were not just driven out. They were driven into concentration camps, labor camps, slave labor camps, death camps. And that's what Luisa participated in. At least 30,000 of them died. Luisa was 9 years old when this started for her family, and she was 12 when it ended. Eventually, she came to the United States and to Yellow Springs. Her title today is Divisions and Thoughts on the Promise of Never Again. Luisa.
Thank you very much. And I'm so glad you came. It's wonderful to see you. Thank you. And I want to just introduce the logistics. I'm going to read this. It's only 3 pages long, and it's big enough for I can read it. So it's not very long. It's hopefully I have it here. But so in other words, I'll read this, and then maybe in what I read, there may be some kind of example that I'll refer to. And the reason I chose this way of doing it, because when I start talking, sometimes I go every which way, and I wanted to sort of get this across. And so I thought at the end, I'll tell a little story that will sort of encapsulate some of the stuff, or at least one general idea. And then there'll be questions, and we can talk anything pertaining to this. and also what you read in the book or the introduction, would that be okay? So, and since there's so few of us, if you feel like leaving any time, if I should say something that's not so kind, then of course I won't be hurt. So we got this out of the way, okay? So I'm so glad and thank you for coming. And then if I also stumble on reading, it's just what I always say. I'm this nervous person and I can't get rid of it, okay? So, and I'm now, you didn't say that, but I'm 87 years old, almost 88. So any mistakes I made, you have to excuse me, okay? Thank you so much. I'm going to just start reading, okay? At the end of the war, when concentration camps were liberated in Europe, new concentration camps had already replaced them. I was in one of them, and I was there 3 years after the war, from 1945 to 1948. I began writing about my experiences at the onset of the war in Bosnia in 1992, when the term ethnic cleansing was used on the news with the added emphasis that it was the first such event since the Second World War. Since I was witness to the fact that this wasn't so, and the image is present on TV, confirmed what I had experienced some 40 years ago, I could not remain silent. I had to speak up, and I did, and I'm speaking still. Experiences in a concentration camp, one wouldn't wish anyone to have. Since I lived such experiences, I feel I have the information as well as a responsibility to speak about what I had witnessed, what I came to know, and what I brought with me. I could talk about my experiences in concentration camps tonight, about re-entry into civilized society, first as a repatriated enemy of the people, that's what they call us, okay? In communist Yugoslavia, then as a refugee in a displaced persons camp in Germany, and later as citizen living in the United States. But since this information is in my book, it being available in libraries and still in print, I decided to talk about our attitudes toward one another, attitudes which can lead to such acts as ethnic cleansing, genocide, atrocities committed against human beings by human beings in relationship to the plea of victims and the promise survivors made to remember, to which we added, never again. One hears said that it's important to speak about such crime against humanity in order to remind ourselves that it must not happen again. Never again, we say, remembering past events, consecrating places where they happened, immortalizing, validating victims, honoring them, some more than others, sealing the promise in remembrance that we will never allow such to happen again. But such events do happen again and again and again. And it should occur to us that we may not be doing that which is required to make good on the intended promise. How can they do such monstrous things, we say, and separate ourselves from the other? We vilify the perpetrators, the individual, the country, the nation, the ethnic, religious, political, the social group. the entire race, they, not we, are capable of all things terrible. We see the evil in them, see them, if not as the devil himself, then as his closest of kin, see them as German, Jew, Palestinian, Arab, Chinese, Russian, see them as Hutu, Tutsi in Rwanda, as Afar, Tigray in Ethiopia. Today, victim and perpetrator interchangeably, names. When others are doing the things we accuse them of, and they often do, we take it as proof and attribute atrocities to the other in general, see them as threat to our way of life. In all this, we overlook that which we ourselves are doing, perhaps perpetuating the same attitude we see in the other, that these others see us as threat to their existence complicates matters, making it more difficult to realize that we may be participating in the same game. We may have different ideologies, ours being the better, of course, but the attitude of separating ourselves from the other is the same. By making such divisions, separating ourselves from the other in our everyday life, letting our differences divide us, we are participating in an activity which is the beginning of and may lead to acts we say we can't imagine doing. The assumption that divides, the attitude that can lead to acts that kill, and not only to horrendous acts like ethnic cleansing or genocide, but to dispositions that ignore the harm our attitudes, assumptions, and ideologies do, and so contribute to the evil unleashed. Our assumptions and attitudes may lead us to perceive our differences as threat to our livelihood, our life. Undesirable others at the border. I'm suggesting to think about an example. Our assumptions and our identity bound up with an ideology to such an extent that we exclude all others, excessive patriotism, for example, our insistence that only those who look like us, think or believe as we do, are worthy members of society to which we belong. Only they are worthy of our trust. The others are suspect, a threat to our way of life. They have to be guarded against, restricted, disempowered, expelled as threat to our community. They have to be eliminated, if not killed, killing them outright, making it harder for them to survive, or simply letting them die. There might be some examples you can think of in our country. The underlying creed for ethnic cleansing, genocide, and such, as long as the others are, we have to fear for our existence. By eliminating the other, we have eliminated the threat to our life, and the delusion follows. They die, we don't. I'll say that again. They die, we don't. Rationalizing the insanity, they must die so we may live without the fear of death. And the prime motive is exposed. The fear of death turned victory, victory over death, a powerful motive for survival, as well as for nurturing our ideologies, clinging to them for dear life, and at all costs, a dangerous path to follow. Whether we cultivate such dangerous notions, letting our differences divide us, only we know. Becoming aware of this would be the thing we needed to do in order to recognize our participation in such divisive activities, activities which lead to the exclusion of the other from the human community, to eliminating them, if possible, from ever having existed. Becoming aware of how we perceive the other, admitting it to ourselves, all can be done. Seeing the individual instead of fearing the differences between us, seeing the essential self relating to the human being with all differences present, appreciating what our awareness reveals, affirming our humanity. We could do that. We should, because we can. I have sometimes said unkindly, since I grew up among killers, I recognize the killer in all of us. Because of my experiences witnessing that we are capable of both, fearing the differences between us and appreciating, recognizing the individual self, the other, with all differences present. I know that such appreciation is not the same as tolerance, and that is not the same as bridging the gap between us by righting the wrongs our divisions have caused. So such activities are necessary to restore justice and equality in order to provide for the well-being of all. They are bridges only across the great divide and are not about avoiding divisions. In fact, they are built on them. Seeing the essential self, the human being, attending to the relationship between us is an act of self-affirmation, an affirmation of our humanity. And I think the arts exemplify some of that. It's easy to do it in art than with people. So I just thought I'd point that out, maybe you think about it. Seeing the essential self does not require building bridges. It requires our readiness, our ability to see other with all differences fully present, seeing the individual self, and in so doing, enriching our awareness, affirming ourselves. Such seeing may happen in a blink of an eye, and with a bit of grace or a wholeness, a bit of division, just for a moment, peeling away the blinders, restoring our sight. I leave you with the charge, look behind the curtain to discover the wizard at work. We may have little power to change the power that divide us, to stop the corruption, the pain, the carnage caused, but we can extend our awareness, each individually, to take a clearer view. The rewards are immensely large, favorable for each of us to make good in the privacy of our own hearts, the promise of never again. We cannot know how far this awareness will go to build a community among us, but we must dare to do all we know because we can. So I would leave you with a little story that maybe make better sense than I just did, but I hope you understand it, and then we can talk about things and we can talk about the book. But it's not long ago, maybe 8 months ago or so, I pick up the phone and a male voice says, I'm calling you from Israel. And I don't know anyone in Israel. So he says that he has, from time to time, he has looked to find his great grandparents that were called Beinhauer. And so this time when you look, my book came up, and because in my book there is a place when I describe the village, and there is a dry goods store, and it belonged to the Beinhauers, and of course I remember it, and so I tell him yes, and I don't know. He says his grandfather, great grandfather, was called Adolf Beinhauer. Of course, they died in the Holocaust, you know. I may have forgot to mention this. I thought Israel would give a clue. Mm-hmm. So he is a young man, young compared to me, like maybe 57 years old. And he tells me all that, and I get very quiet. And I have to say, so he doesn't hang up, I say, I'm crying. And the reason I was crying, I thought he had told me that his grandmother, this love for his grandmother, who of course escaped to Israel or whatever, was survived, but her parents didn't. He loved this grandmother, and through her cooking and stuff. And she also grew up in the same village. So in other words, there was an immediate connection. And what made me cry is that someone was seeking something of home, and I was waiting for someone to find me. And so this communication was so sincere. So when I said, I'm crying, then he said, we'll cry together. But it wasn't about the carnage or whatever happened. It was a cry of joy, sort of. And I was thinking of this. I can't explain it so much because I would have needed about 10 days to survive all this. So you're getting why I put it down like that, so I don't go flaky. But the thing is, it so touched me that across the great divide, and you know what they say, German Jew, and you know what I mean, you have to apologize that you're alive sometimes, you know, each other. And we bridged that gap just because of a name. I mean, he wanted to find out the people that were killed. I was wanting a community that I knew when I was a child, and we united in this village across the whatever, across the stuff that you're, this internet and everything. So in other words, I don't think I'm getting it quite across, but since then, and just, he doesn't know I'm giving a talk, but since then, I get little images for where he travels. And so he takes pictures of the food mostly because we have the same background. So that's what he liked about his grandmother's food, and we discussed it and stuff. But of course, I forgot to say that with my effort, because he said, Adolf Beinhauer, I called a friend who was 3 years older and was still alive in Germany. I'm sorry to say he since died, but it's only 8 months ago that I have this new friend in Israel. And so I was thinking, and I asked my friend in Germany whether he knows Adolf Beinhauer, no. I told him who they were Jewish, and he said the only Jewish people he knows, they were living close to his house, and the lady always came at a certain time of year and gave him cookies or something like that. And but they were called something else, Dolphys. They were Dolphys, and I was thinking after he hung up that Dolphy, Adolf, because in our village, it was sort of very strange. Sometimes they had these people that were called names like Lang Schneider. And Lang and Schneider, I mean, Lang is like my name, Lang, and Schneider. And he had neither of those names. He was a tailor, so he was Schneider, and he was tall, so he was Lang. And so people called him that. And so that's why I thought of Dolphy. I never heard the name or nickname, but it made sense. So I called back my friend and I said, the friend said in Germany that Dolphy used to wear his hand, Mr. Dolphy, wore his hand in a sling. So I called the man in Israel, whose name is Ofer Kish, so that I don't leave his name out. And he says, I said, did your great-grandfather, by any chance, do you know that he had his arm in a sling? And he said, how did you know that? So he found his great-grandfather through me, who was 9.5 years old when I left the village, and his mother, his grandmother, whom he loved, left before then because the Holocaust was before. And we find, he says he tells everybody this story and they can't believe it, like a miracle. And so I just thought of this story that none of us have this thing. Like I was there when his family was killed, and his grandmother got away, but and he never knew me. But what was there is that essential cells that came across even the telephone, and how it was said. And so this is possible. And I saw it in the book that I wrote. I saw it in the concentration camp, but with the commandant. If you ever read this book, there is this thing where there is this man that even his own partisans feared him. And my mother, out of desperation, sent me out to ask this man on his way into the village. He carried a gun, and I was small, and it was so cold. And 3 days it took me to be able to approach him, because I got so scared. And so when I approached him, he did something terrible. Vic McCunis said, that he abused me somehow, psychologically. But when I was, and he did, but all those things, that's why I repeated, with all the divisions present, you can still see that human being, the other as the other as something that enlarges your space to be. And I think that especially these days, we take our differences so seriously, and then we divide ourselves around it. We don't, and that's okay, it can be done, and it will be done, but you can count on this other way to approach the other as you would yourself. And I'm afraid I'm not getting it quite clear. So maybe I should now stop talking. So we know that Ofer Kish, and another thing that surprised me because I'm more sort of always with people that are artists. And then when somebody comes out of business, like Offer Kish, and somebody looks him up, I didn't even think of it, looked him up and saw that he was the head of Lufthansa for 17 countries in Eastern Europe. So very impressed me. I looked at the picture, he sits in a leather chair, you know, and all that, so inhibited. But all those distinctions, all those differences where I could say, you know, the artist and the businessman, you know, nothing. And so I'm trying to get across, and I wish I was more articulate about it, but I would like you to think about this and maybe bring it up, if I am quiet, bring it up, what you felt that I may have hit on this, if I did, that we now need to see the other, because there are such divisive things going on to divide us. Sometimes I listen to the news and I think they've all gone mad and forgot to inform me. You know, it's like you're in this other place. And I mean, if I could sit down with you, we could do all kinds of things. And since we're sitting down, let's do something. Okay. So if you want to ask or bring something up, or even if you want to leave all these and go to the book, we don't have to have a thing now. I'm done. Yes.
So prior to the end of the war, or maybe even prior to the beginning of the war, did your community of Germans in Yugoslavia, did you feel as if you were the other in Yugoslavia?
No.
Or were you
No.
part of the? I mean,
I'm
you
so
were-
glad you asked that,
Okay.
because that's what I wanted to say, but I didn't name the book Casualty War. The press did that, you know, and so I only added a childhood remembrance. I wanted to be a little bit more clearer. The casualty was the village. The village were made up, you know, there were lots of ethnic groups, and our neighbors were Serb and Hungarian, and my father was a blacksmith, and he served everyone, and there were two other blacksmiths, maybe they preferred to go there, but that's what was lost, that integrity, which we now don't have. You know, that integrity that puts us together then instead of tears us apart. And I've noticed it, I can remember that, and you may have read that, or when you saw the interviews, you know, or something, that I remember where I was when I first had this feeling. Like I wanted to go back. It's like you see a broken piece of a doll and you want them to put it back together. And then they were taking away the Jewish people, and the apothecary was such a nice place to be. And the person that was the woman that was the pharmacist, she was taken away, but there was her furniture outside and people were auctioning it off. And I didn't know about that because I was in kindergarten, you know. And so I came home and I told my mother, and they told me that they took the Jewish people away, and my mother said, if you had a needle of these people, then you were, you know, you participated in the crime. You know what I mean? It didn't help me much to get over that, but you could sense that when things were torn apart, even a child could sense it. And the bystander, I visited the village, and so did Offer Kish, you know, looking for little scraps from his parents. And I told him that cannot be found, you know. And so I told him that our relationship is the thing that we found, and then basta. We don't need little scraps, But the thing is, there was such an integral unity that you could sense, and the child could grow in this, and then it was gone. And so it wasn't that we were all vying for position. We weren't like Democrats and Republicans and whatever they're vying for, presidency, or it was more of a unity. Is that answer?
Absolutely, yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
And this is what I go back even to my other things that I've written. I thought it never came so clearly to me, but I thought, oh, I have a new idea. Then I go back and I say, oh, there it is, So I just didn't develop it, yeah. So stop me someone by asking me something. How's that? Nobody wants, yes.
Who was it that, I presume your whole family was moved to the concentration camp, is that right? Your whole family?
No, because the family unit was already gone, because what they did do, the Germans did do, is they, my father and anyone that was German, and there were only 500 Germans, in that village, but the men had to go to war, so they were gone, and then the Russians came and they took all the young people away. And and then the partisans came and they shot a lot of people right away. They were making, clearing things out. And it's interesting, then they took away the women to Russia that were a certain age. And when I watched this in 92, when I watched the perpetrators, so-called, because the Bosnians were also communists, and and the Serbs and stuff. And I watched them suffering the same thing or going through the same experiences. I recognized the experience, even the age was the same. Of men from such and such an age. It's like there was an ancestral chest where this book was retrieved and followed, like a script, and I was interested in this Rwandan thing, and how they called these people that they are going to eliminate cockroaches or something like the Jewish people were called, and we were also called. But what I remember when they took people out to kill them, they liked to put us or these people, when they killed them, to the place where animals used to be buried. So the distinction was, if you reduce them rob their humanity, then of course it's easier to kill them because they're animals, they're this, they're that, the other. So in other words, they did these systematically, and by the time we went to the concentration camp, there were old people, invalids, they were children, and women that weren't taken to Russia because they weren't the right age. And my mother was just a year older than the right age, that cutoff. So I went to the concentration camp, and with my mother, my grandmother, my grandfather, all kinds of aunts, and from different sides of the story, like I said, the whole village was interrelated. It's a wonder we can even speak, but the thing is, we were sort of separated later. So they took my grandfather away, then they took my mother away, then she reappeared again. So just when you got used to something, you didn't even get used to it, but just when things were like that, then there were other things happening. So it's like you that stability that the village provided was gone. And my father was captured by the English, and they were very nice. That Americans didn't have such a nice. I mean, when the Americans took some of these people, they were not nice to them. That was well known, you know. I don't know why that is. The French were nice also, but so because Germany was then divided into these things, and of course the Russians were not so nice. Not even as nice as the Americans, so we can be proud of that, I guess. But the thing is, so we were always separated, and then they took the children away whose mothers were in Russia. And that was a horrendous thing in the chapter when you read it, you know, that, I mean, you cannot imagine, and that's why I said with some pride, I shouldn't say it's pride, but I have experienced something that, and I'm not saying this is better, that very few people have, and maybe no one in here, experienced something like that for a long time at the beginning of their life. There are lots of people that have, but I'm saying that's what the victim's plea was. Remember, you know, and the survivor has the obligation to say this, because I have experiences, yes, there's my own, but as a human being, I give you report. And I have to be very honest and not slip and think, oh, you know, I'm special because and I can't feel guilty either. Maybe I do, that I survived and I can't recognize it yet, because I do, like with Offer Kish, when I heard his grandmother, and she was alive and well when he was growing up, but he was still looking for that connection. And I'm just saying that I feel responsible to the living and the dead to say it. And I don't say it with some kind of self-pride or trying to say I suffered, you know, because I'm here. You know what I mean? So I always overdo things, don't I?
No, not at all.
What?
Not at all. You're not overdoing it at all. You're making it human. I was going to say, from an more abstract point of view, I'm an anthropologist, and we know that all human beings evolved from one common ancestor, an African. So we're all literally related to each other. We're all members of one big family, but we have created these divisions ourselves.
Right, that's
As a
what
result.
my point is.
Right.
You create, not only do you create them,
Yeah.
but you live by them somehow. You live by them. Why? You know, okay.
And we all share the same, we are 99.9% genetically identical across the world. And yet we make these big divisions based on some false ideas about biological differences.
Yeah, and I was suggesting that once you think of eliminating things, there is something behind it. And I just called it the fear of death because my book says, because that's what I think. But I say at my book, you know, not only did they want us not to have, they wanted us not to have or to be, but they wanted us never to have been. You know how dire that is? That means so, it's not mean. It's so, how should I, so helpless, so afraid of death, so wanting to be, you know what I mean? It's like like I said, a child, even with the other example, like a child losing something and then wants it to be. And if you are and you represent that threat to them, they they go this overboard. They go like insane, about being the one that survives. That's how I looked at it, and I saw plenty of examples because they would separate us without, they wouldn't look at us. They would, and a child notices that, you know what I mean? They would just, not that they looked far away or embarrassed, as if you weren't there. I've never witnessed for that consistent time in the concentration camp when you ever confronted any of them, that you simply didn't exist. Wiped out, like that. And so in other words, that's why I probably got it from many other sources, that I didn't invent this, but this thing of evil, that they're evil or stuff. I'm not saying that we should understand them because they had to do it. I'm just saying, think of that and then go about your own thing. Like you said, you don't have to create these things, you don't have to let it affect you.
And we also, the United States prides itself on being a Christian nation.
Yeah.
Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Love your neighbor as yourself. What happened to all of that in the creation of these divisions?
Well, it probably happened that you take it as a way of distinguishing yourself from the other, separating yourself from the other, like you're better, or you're this, or you're that,
So I wish I could have taken notes, heard your speech before, so I could write these down and be coherent. But both your presentation and thoughts afterwards, there was the ugly American back in the 60s that was talked about when they traveled overseas. And I never thought much about it. But in my polyester suit days, I went to a meeting once. This couple, they're from P&G in Cincinnati. And I remember them commenting in a party about they traveled the world and just got back from a trip. They just got back from a trip overseas. And a comment at this party was, I don't understand how they can live that way. And yes, that's how I felt in 1973. Is like, how can you travel and have that question in your mind? How can you be human and have that question?
Yeah, because you're already separated.
You've already separated. And the other side of that same separation are when folks around me will say, how could they do that? How could he do that? How could she do that?
Yes.
And it's a separating of not understanding that I don't have much to do with the devil or evil, but the capacity of doing harm is part of being human. And some of those greatest atrocities are not that far away from our normal way of being alive, as sad as they are. I mean, I'm not sounding like a mass killer or anything, but these behaviors are part of being human.
I understand what you say, but I also say, be that as it may, be that as it may, or how we see it, if we keep in mind that we have other ways of dealing or seeing the other, and going for that, there are plenty of things that will stop us doing that.
Yeah.
This morning, for instance, I was not true to what I said about possibilities. So someone can provoke you where you just feel like one more word and I will torture. No, I will kill you. It's not that it's human or whatever it is. I'm saying we deal with people, but sometimes we make those connections where we see the other, and it's maybe easy for children, but they also have their own problems, or it's easier with some people than others. But I think we know this way of dealing with each other, and we don't have to maybe even put it in anybody. But seeing the evil only in the other, I think that causes a lot of grief.
That's all I meant, that it's way
I know.
separated from
Yeah.
humanity by only seeing it lodged in
Yes,
another person.
yes.
The other thing you said that caused the cascade of thoughts that I won't indulge here, but
Why not?
the word Catholic, and then you related it to your town. I come from a town of, I was raised 17 years in a town of some 800 people. And really in the United States, and showing up in our politics along with also, the casualties have been maybe small towns and community. Whether it's going to church together or going to a bowling league together, whether it's the baseball on Friday and Saturday nights at the community park, that there's been a casualty of modernity that's also helping to separate people and hardening the lines around tribes, I think. Just
Yeah.
nothing profound, but
Yeah,
it's the same
maybe,
dynamic in a way.
yeah, maybe these things, the technology is wonderful, but maybe it also does change us and we have to go with it. But I don't, maybe sometimes I could even doubt why seeing the other and like communicating, or more like a communion, building our village within us, building this community within us. Maybe I'm thinking too much of it, you know what I mean? But I could do that and saying that all has to be left behind so that we can go forward, or go with the technology or with our way of being. But I think I feel sometimes that you have to pick some goodness, not making an ideology out about it, but understanding that there are different ways to relate to each other that bring about different communities. And, it can be said in religious terms and other things. And then, of course, we will have other people that guard against religion and stuff. So we can't avoid this other thing, I think. The thing where we cannot even being rational and scientific about it, even if you pin it down that it's human nature, it's not going to help us live. And even this is not going to help us live. It wasn't meant like that. I'm just saying, since I know about people that killed people or made it difficult to be, because I was there. And I'm thinking like that. I was thinking of, I wonder why people that go out into space and see this beautiful thing that they see and feel this, that we are there alone and somehow tell us to stick together. But you know what I mean? There is, all of us can do something about these things that wants to do away, whether out of need or out of craziness, wants to do away with the human spirit. And I feel like I don't have the answer, but I do know some things. Yes.
Well, somebody else has a question. I don't know how I
No, but I do want to ask you about in your book, when you went back to your hometown, in the yellow Mercedes, and they looked at you like you came from Mars.
Oh.
Could you talk a little bit about going back?
There?
Yeah.
Yes, we went back. I had a show in Europe of my little class collages, and my cousins, they were 2 years old. I had two cousins that were always with me. I see that's good when you talk. You can see my cousin was with me, my aunt was with me, and they were 2 years old, and now they're one has died since, but one is in Cleveland, Ohio. And so in other words, they wanted to go back, and I was going to find this place. Now, this was I don't know exactly when it was, but it was long after the concentration camp. And we took this yellow Mercedes, my cousin had this yellow Mercedes, and he and his wife and we left their sons at the beach someplace. And we traveled for 2 days or whatever it was, and then we were going to go back. But so we found that place. Is that what you want me to talk about? We found that place.
The place being the camp or your village?
No, we didn't go back to the village then.
The camp.
The camp,
Okay.
because that's what he wanted to see. He wanted me to find the camp. So we're driving this thing and crazy, you know, we thought that we can't tell anybody. As if somebody was watching us now, after 40 years or whatever it was. So we're going there and never thinking what might happen if we do find it. So when we found it, this village, and I was trying to find, he wanted to then find the house we were in because we were packed in these houses, 40 people to a tiny house, with 3 rooms. And so, okay, so we get into this village. The village was marked forever because we were there 3 years and they had taken up all the fences because they didn't give us anything to heat the rooms with and stuff. So people at night would take a piece off here and a piece off there. And then, now these fences that exist on other villages are gone, so you could see through the thing. There, I remember there was this lady with her little child, and I was getting closer to the backward thing, but it was real, they were real people, but I was going back when there was a concentration camp, so psychologically the village worked on us. Then he had the idea that I knew where the death wagon, they would have these death wagons and pile the dead on, when lots of people die, it's a daily thing, and sometimes they forget and they have these big things with people's hair and all that. So I don't want to freak you out, but so I know what directions they went. And since we couldn't follow the wagon and stuff, I had to guess, well, nothing was good enough for him because he didn't see, because his wife was German and she expected a camp for the Jews. We weren't civilized like that there. We didn't have gas ovens. And I don't mean that as an insult. I'm just trying to be a little upbeat so we don't drown in all of this. But so I'm going back there and suddenly I'm at the house of this wonderful lady. She was Serb and she took me in when it was the worst of times. And she asked me to come because I spoke this language. I was bilingual because of my mother having a friend who was Serb. So I learned these 2 languages together. And Tetka Mila was her name, Aunt Mila was her name. And she would give this bread out. We would go begging. I had trouble with that because I was shy, believe it or not. And I'm still nervous. Nobody believes me, but I am. So I would go there, but then she saw that I spoke her language. She would invite me to come. And when we passed that house, I wanted to go in. I literally couldn't. There was a board on this little, the door was smaller now, as I remember, and there was a board, a baseboard that you had to step over. And as I was raising my foot, I had this, I can't explain it. It's like the earth shook. I suddenly saw this little girl, which I once was, and she was real, and she was really here. And I had made a story out of it. I had trying to tell this because I felt I had to, and there she was so unreal. I was so charged. If anybody would have touched me, I would have probably electrocuted them. And my cousin was saying, there's a house. And then I pointed the way the wagon went. And I said, that's where a house is. Never forget it. I didn't know about never forget. I said, never forget it. And but the thing about the little girl was so real, and then this man came from out of nowhere, and he used to be in Germany, a worker. That's how long ago it was. And everything sort of reminded me of it. And I was it angered me, not that it happened, but that I had flattened it out. And the little girl, and I didn't see the little girl, you know what I mean? But the memory of that reality, literally, and I don't know if I answered what you asked.
Yeah.
So this thing is, I brought this with me, and I brought with me a kind of insecurity, but it's okay, a kind of fear, so when somebody says something like recently I was in a hospital and the doctor was saying to me, if you don't take this medicine, I didn't even know him, you are going to have a stroke. And the fear, I never mentioned the concentration camp. Among friends, yes, but I don't go around saying, I am this, But then I said, I'm a concentration camp survivor, and that I'm here and all is a miracle. And you are making me afraid. You're putting me right back there. You know what I mean? By not allowing me to absorb this thing. So I must have a kind of, I did say to him, I know a fear that I brought with me that I have lives with me every day. Every day. I don't complain about it. I'm not any better or worse because of it. But so the little girl thing, that admitting to myself that this really happened made me very strong. It might have come out as anger, but not anger towards anyone. I can closest see that it may be anger towards that I flattened it out. But it removed some of that fear and say, yes, I am. You know what I mean? So in this relationship with the doctor saying, and I was so nice to him afterwards. I said, he was with me for a long time. I said, I faced the commandant. I didn't tell him about the book. I faced the commandant, and I was able to see the humanity in him. So it's easy for me to see the humanity in you. You wanted good for me, but I wanted it surprises, it comes out, maybe because I'm old, and then I don't have that protection of the ego. Like, I don't really care, but I still get nervous, and I wanted to tell you the truth to make you stronger, or to see that every day you have the opportunity to see the other, and in whatever small way, and even if nobody calls you up or sends you pictures from Israel, that small thing will be there between us, and it's not for anything, it's for nothing, It's just because we're human and we have the possibility to care. And I think that when I look at these politicians that talk and make a game of it, and then the media takes it and makes more of an entertainment out of it, and the people are in Cincinnati or in saying homeless on the ground, sleeping on the ground. They're people that elected them to help them. Nothing. And I want to say, oh, we're the most powerful country. The power that they have are like the power that kills. And the carnage, when you think of, they can't buy medicine because they have not money, or they can't go to the doctor, or they have, and then they complain about them, how they're uneducated, how they're crude, how they think. The amounts that these people would make would be equal to any concentration camp. So when they come with their goodness and their love, you know, I'm saying, look at you, what you, and I'm not saying, oh, they're evil. I'm saying, why don't they work on that? Why don't they work on the thing that's possible? It is possible. Someone tells you there was no opportunity to make connections, and there was Stetka Mila. You know what I mean? There was the commandant that did not such good things. But when it came to recognizing me as a human being, I can't forget that. I don't use it as, you know, forgiveness thing. You know, I'm just saying it's possible. Why don't we do it? We know how. Yes.
So you were 12 when you left the concentration.
12 and a half.
Okay.
I told Anna said.
So did you have this sense of compassion then, or did it take you time to come to where you are now in terms of?
No, yeah, I think I know how to answer, because when I wrote this book, I had to tune in on my feelings then. And there is a man that came after the thing was over. They put us all in that death camp where I was from the very beginning. So those of us that were working some other place or were hidden or something, they found this man that he was hidden in a place where he wasn't, you know, where it wasn't so bad. And they found him and they beat him, and they beat his wife to death, you know. So I remember those feelings. He came to our, you know, when 20,000 people are gathered, some of them, of course, have died in this camp. And so you don't go visiting, you don't have social things. I always say, I didn't have sleepovers, and that's why I'm so, you know, not socially smart. And so the thing is, this man came and he was black and blue, and he told in front of the children, in front of all of us, how they killed his wife. And of course, he sort of was apologizing for himself. And I felt this feeling that everything I drug out of my thing, even though I was by then not 9 and a half, yes, I did have these things. I did have, and sometimes I didn't. Like someone, my aunt had some earrings sewn in her coat, you know, to hide it from being taken away because he took everything away. So she gave it to me when I was 12 or whatever I was then, and I had these earrings on, and of course I had hair sort of covering them. I didn't want. But I showed the children, and one day somebody said, "Luisa, you lost your earring." And I remember, now this is memory. See, I remember when you dig things out, like in a memoir, there are memories that you have, that they're not things that you now have, the feelings about it. I remember the feeling that I couldn't care. I mean, these were the most shiniest thing. They were rubies or something. And not that I knew their value, but they were among this gray atmosphere. They were so beautiful, you know, no feeling. When feelings can be lost, you know. And so I didn't have that. But when they take my Seppi, my cousin, away, I mean, those things are felt. Like when Offer Kish was trying to say his grandfather didn't own a shop, which he didn't. That was his brother. We found all that out. And he made me think, well, maybe I don't know about the Beinhauers. You know what I mean? Because I doubt. And then I remember that the till that they had, where the cash register or whatever they had on it, where they measured out material, was equal to my head. And I think I told you that once, that kind of memory that is a physical memory. So my feelings about this were that kind of a memory. And when my grandmother died and my mother sewed her into a gunny sack, and of course, when I talked about it, the poetry I had to take care of then, you know what I mean? But I had to work with the base feeling, and the base feeling had been there, you know? So it's not something made up. And if I did anything, which also came out in the translation, see, the book travels and somebody picks it up and translates it, has a life of its own. I get so excited about that idea. And she calls me up, she's a translator, and I haven't spoken Hungarian. I learned it when I was 7. I'm not really good at it. But she sends me her thing, and even that can be revived. Like things that I haven't taught Hungarian forever, you know, never. I mean, except when I was 7 or 8. So I could read that stuff, you know, that she translated, and I could find where she made mistakes. So she had these Serbs. She just couldn't do without those Serbs, like they were the evil ones. You know what I mean? I said, where do you see that in my book? I don't see that, you know? And I said, I did the book being so careful to tell the truth about my feelings. And even all of us in the concentration camp, we never said the Serbs did it. The Serbs. We said the partisans did it. Maybe that's not a bit better, but the partisans were the one that shut us out, you know, of their even. They would take their own eyes out if we were reflected in them. That's what I said. I think I said that somewhere.
And
Yeah.
the partisans were the victors in that regard. I mean, these were the Russians.
No, they were Serbs, Bosnians, every minority.
Okay, but they were communists. Weren't they Russian sympathizers?
What?
With the partisans, weren't they communist sympathizers to the Russians? That's what
Oh, yes,
that's what I want to get.
they are.
Yeah.
They were always, and to this day, and I hear it now that Russia does it. They feel that they're Slavic, and somehow they, you know, they have not this excessive patriotism, but everybody has. They identify with this, and they're their brothers. And you know, somebody once wanted to somehow say the Croats and the Serbs. I said, don't fool yourself. And when it comes to that, they're going to stick together as brothers. And the Russians are a little bit.
Tito was the kind of the leader of.
Well, he was the partisan leader because they were in well, where I come from, there are some woods, but they were in Bosnia, they were in the woods. And then after the Russians left and the war wasn't even at an end, they came out and Tito established his government. And there was a lot of bad stuff that happened to them during the war, and the Germans were gone. I mean, they were driven by the Russians. They couldn't, I mean, if they found them. My father's brother had asthma, and the Germans still took them into the thing. And so he was found, I mean, someplace, and I mean, they dragged him to death, you know, the partisans. They also burnt villages and stuff before the war was over, but then they came out, and it was in fall, before the war, in 44 in fall, and they call it the Bloody Fall. And there were plenty of people that were Serbs that weren't for the partisans and stuff like that. And later on, when Tito was president, there were people that were in prison because, just like in Russia, because Tito thought, or the communists thought, that they were sabotaging it and stuff like that. That's how it goes. So I don't ever want to, when the village was whole, the Serbs and the Hungarians were my next of kin. They were the first on the right and the left, the Hungarians and the Serbs. Tetka Mara, that was the friend of my mother. And because I spoke this language, probably did a lot for me in the concentration camp that I could see. So when I hear this Slavic language, this Serb language that I understand, I feel at home. And it was so interesting that in Germany, when I visited a few times, my cousin with whom we went with a yellow Mercedes. So I visited, and somebody who was in the concentration camp with me in that first one, when they asked me to sing, or I said I would, or whatever, it happened. I hope somebody knows what I'm talking about. They had a fire in this first camp. It was very, very cold, and we were in the periphery of the stable, and we had to go out to pee or whatever, and they let us out, and they watched us. And there too, they would say, "Here come my animals." You know what I mean? Then they looked at, it's grotesque. But in other words, when I went and I was on the way out, and they played this wonderful love song, and I listened to it, and I caught myself saying out loud, I too can sing a sad song. And they, of course, didn't expect me to know German. They didn't know me. They were from some other place. It wasn't our Serbs, but they spoke that Serb language. And I felt, once I was in their lap, I went up there, I felt like I was at home. I was very nervous singing, and I was scared, but that language made me, to this day, when somebody speaks Serb, they're my forever friend. I mean, it's sort of a stupid thing, but it is sort of natural in a way. I hope I don't forget what I'm trying to say. What was that?
No, just to go back to what I really wanted to say was is that, I mean, I spent my college career as a history major, and I was mainly interested in American history, and my senior project at Antioch, which took two quarters, a whole 6 months, was about World War II. I never knew about this history in what happened in Yugoslavia after World War II. And I only met you once before today, and I don't think either of us ever intended to get into this topic when we met. It wasn't even that long a meeting. I think what happened was I happened to mention that I'm interested in history, and I've started reading some World War I history.
Yes, that's what it happened.
And you happened to mention something about Yugoslavia, which was kind of a creation after World War I. And that's what started us a bit down this topic. And then we couldn't stop talking. It was hard to kind of like, it was just yabber, yabber, yabber. And I am Jewish. And I kind of felt like this woman was maybe apologizing to me because she, in another century, had some German ancestors who came to the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. And I sort of knew from my World War I history that, if you were Hungarian, you were on the sort of weaker side of that empire and so on and so on and so forth. And then to have anybody have the possibility of any guilt whatsoever, about this, you're not a Nazi. If your father, by the way, was conscripted into the German army,
Right.
That's correct. But that's what happens when you're living in a country and that's invaded, and suddenly the government changes and they're telling you what to do. I mean, our government
Yes,
has
I never-
conscripted men in.
Yeah.
And to me, it was just interesting because I suddenly felt like I never heard this history before.
Yes.
And I suddenly felt like I have to know. Now, there's more written on this history than Luisa's book, but there's not much that I was aware of what happened actually in Eastern Europe. It made me realize in all of Eastern Europe after World War II, we sort of know what happened in East Germany, Poland, and so on and so forth. But there was a heck of a lot more to learn about that.
And I meant to, I think I said then to you,
Yeah.
never for 1 hour or for 1 day, never would I apologize
Yeah.
because I'm German. I think that's
Okay,
another
okay,
basic thing.
Yeah.
Because it's not based, it's not based on the thing that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Even if you're truly German and you were living in Germany, that's why I say we vilify not just them and then a whole race and everything, and we don't stop to think that that is the wrong way to go. That may be a bridge towards evening out things, but bridges are not as good as they are to do everything to try to undo or give privileges to others. Bridges won't lead us to essential self. It can't be done because it doesn't do any wrong, but it isn't the thing that has to be done first. It won't do you any good. And so it's not that you're wasting time. You should just recognize this does that and that does this, so you can do both, but then apologizing because that divides us further and further and keeps that division open, like rending the thing. It's not good for us, not for it doesn't do it. It can't be undone, that which was done. But you further the doing, if you keep at it, you further it like hitting a wound. And then you're surprised that you're still divided. I'm saying, cutting yourself into little schnitzels.
History is a funny thing. History is usually written by the victors. And in most history that we learn here in the United States, the Germans were the perpetrators. They were the evil ones. And now we find out that there were Germans who were victims.
Oh, of course.
It's really very
Of course. And
upsetting, isn't it?
I remember you were saying, I'm not apologizing, but I had that impression that you might have been.
That's what we do.
By the way,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, how did you feel, for example, when you came to the United States and the first time you heard that during World War II, we confined Japanese people to confinement camps and so
It
on?
didn't do anything to me
Yeah.
because that's still working on that same thing.
Yeah.
I can separate these things maybe because I know where I'm going. Not that this doesn't, I'm just saying, I can see that. But these things, yes, have been done. That should be acknowledged. But that acknowledgement will do something. And I'm not saying that it will do nothing. We should apologize. We should care what we did. But I'm saying all victims, wherever they were, suddenly with me, even if they're Serb, I didn't let her put that Serb stuff in, no matter what she did. I said, that goes out. Not because it's so important, but I'm trying to do this other thing, and somebody makes me eat my words or something like that. See, that's how I get confused. I go on these little tangents and I can't find back. But I'm saying I appreciate, what, and we understood each other. For instance, things that happen in Yellow Springs, I can see that way. I live on Corin High. Okay, you pick Hyde Road. I go down to 68 and I see the policeman parked in front of a thing. I think, Yellow Springs, put yourself on the list, Don't look at Japanese, the thing, you're doing it today, You're doing it today. It doesn't matter who is at fault and who. Oh, we can say, I know this wonderful genius of a comedian. He lives in Yellow Springs. He's my neighbor. You know what I mean? And we can do that. He does something that someone doesn't like, and suddenly he's taking over the town. Again, this thing, not good. So I don't need to go back to what the Japanese had. It's bigger, but the seed is there. And if you don't recognize the seed, poison. You know what I mean? And I'm not talking, we had such a wonderful thing. And all I wanted to say is, my community is the community, not of the casualties. They're not casualties, but wherever people are like that, I'm one of them, and I can say, for instance, when they wanted to publish this book, they had someone write a historian wrote a wonderful preface. And then, he compared me with Anne Frank. Okay, please don't go haywire. But he compared me with Anne Frank, and the publisher sent it to me and said, what do you think of it? I said, well, if you publish that, you may as well use the book to wrap fish in, because you're not going to sell any. Because, first of all, I'm alive. You know what I mean? I don't want to be compared to Anne Frank. You know what I mean? And the thing that is, I don't want this division. We suffered more or they suffered more. I'm saying wherever this happens to human beings, they have such experiences that they can tell you about if they try to tell the truth. If they want to fan the flames of separation and antagonism, go right ahead. You're permitted. And if you want to use it for your own ego, that you are somehow better than others because of this distinction among people, go right ahead. But it's not going to lead you to where I want to go. It's not going to do it. And you could put your head against the wall, and do it, rage. So the Serb, maybe it's the same thing, and the Serbs, their language are part of me. Like in the book I said, if I hated them, what would happen to my love? Because the first thing I had is this experience of wholeness. Their voices are part of what I recognize myself once. I don't know how else to say it, and I'm not trying to convert you, and sometimes I preach on, and Anna is so kind, she can tell me, and she says, enough now. What do you think?
No,
It's all in-
you're very clear.
Okay, thank you.
You're very clear, especially if you've read the book. And by the way, that introductory chapter on the history is invaluable.
Yeah.
That book is worth, that chapter alone is worth the price of the book.
Oh, that's what they wanted to cut out too, that
Yeah.
translator, and I said, "Huh? Please, so I speak enough Hungarian, so if anyone speaks Hungarian, we can have a conversation.
Well, just offhand, when you mentioned Anne Frank, everybody saw the humanity in her. And as I was reading your book, I kept thinking to myself, this little girl got lucky, and then I suddenly realized, wait a minute, she's getting lucky too often for it to just be a fluke. You got lucky in the sense that people were seeing your humanity. Somehow they were able to see your humanity. When you sang, they gave you money that you didn't need or anything like that, or
I
that you
couldn't use.
you couldn't use. But on the other hand, while other people were foraging for just anything, dead grasses to eat, you were somehow making friends with Mila. And then what was it, the commandant's wife? She was a young woman or something like that, who kind of took you under your wing, and there were just a few places where I couldn't help thinking people are seeing this little girl's humanity.
No, and also, I think this is nice that she brings that up. I think we feel that when with children or when we have, friendships and stuff, we feel the receptivity. And so it's not because I was lucky or because I noticed with my relatives and other people when we talk together, everybody has to say, I was lucky because I did this, or I was good and so they saved me. That's all good. But I think that this thing that I'm trying to grown out is that people are receptive to that. And children can maybe do it better than when we were children, because we had the environment that was also receptive, So in one sense, we don't have to fault ourselves that we play these other things or that we want to,
Hey, hi, George.
Oh, goodness, I'm sorry.
I'm all right.
But anyway, maybe I appreciate what you're saying.
The commandant takes you, when you make the request that you want to be in a place that's warm to at least work. But I just got toward the end of the book. I haven't quite finished it, but you run into this commandant again. And he says to you something to the effect of, you were the only person that I couldn't quite hate.
Yes, and the child thinks that you hated my parents and how terrible that is. But the child sees also that other thing. I think there is a way that I'm trying to say that I wasn't special. I had an advantage because I spoke the language. I had an advantage because I was this child that people could relate to, but other people had other things, and then people had music, like in the Jewish concentration camp, they say they gave, I remember we had also entertainment that the people did, but it was sort of risque, and one of the guards took me there, so I knew that I wasn't supposed to be there because I was a little kid, and they were sexually, but I didn't know what they were. But so in other words, I saw all kinds of things that could have happened in any Jewish concentration camp, other than but the horror of other things. I'm not saying I experienced everything that other people in Rwanda or something experienced. I'm just saying there is a thing that ties us together, makes us a community. And if you're thrown out of that because we were not good enough to be Jewish, because we were Rwandans, I don't like that. It's the only community we belong to. And to be thrown out of that, and that's what I meant, that's what I felt, then I could read about Anne Frank or the Jewish concentration camp, but I couldn't say that I was in one. You know, that's another exclusion to a thing that you don't really want to belong, but it's like your skin.
There's something there's a background theme that I'm hearing through my filters. And you talked about it when they didn't see you in the camp, the guards didn't see
Yeah,
you.
could you speak up a little? I'm deaf.
I can talk really loud.
Okay, so that we can,
Be good for over here too.
yeah,
A lot of this, whether it's seeing through child's eyes or the guards couldn't see you, they didn't recognize you being there, and building bridges. It strikes me as it is an issue of seeing others with eyes wide open, that to see someone is to validate them. The human capacity to ignore poverty, to ignore illness, to ignore problems is immense. We can ignore all that.
yes.
To look upon it and accept it as a human condition already starts to break down some of the barriers between us, I think. Just eyes wide open, acknowledging the folks on the street, acknowledging anyone who passes me in the car and I make a turn, you'll always see me wave. I mean, acknowledging the other, seeing the other person, just witnessing that they're in the same world as you are.
Yes, and
Starts to break down the lines between.
yes, there are all
It's a
kinds of
start.
fine things, you know, so it's not bridges and then this other thing. You're right, I think you hit on that,
Small part, but
but it is important.
She can end it whenever she wants.
What?
Oh, okay.
It's up to Louise at the end, whenever she wants.
What?
Nothing, wasn't talking to you. That's fine.
Right now I'm lost. What?
Nothing. She
Okay.
was just asking what time it was.
Okay, so, I don't know when you want to leave or something. If anyone has a question or a point or something, but I so appreciated all your things and just your nods and all that you came. It's so nice. And, it's something positive to think about. So you look at your people that are in Yellow Springs and see whether you are judging them by an ideology or you are starting to break down things or whatever it is, it couldn't hurt. And also our arrogance to push out other people because somehow they make us think we'll lose something. Someone's going to own the village. Someone's always owned the village. I mean, you know what I mean? You know? So whatever you do with this, I'm so glad I did something. You know what I mean? It's
Well,
just,
thank you.
Yeah. Nice of you to come. I'm grateful to each and every one of you. And if I said something that hurt anybody, well, you know, you can always call me an old lady that doesn't. That would be it.
Thank you.
And I hope it didn't go everywhere.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's fun.